Hey, I'm Arch, one of the founders at Tax, and in this video, we'll be showing you how you can file your tax return easily using Tax. And whether you filed before or this is your first time filing, we've got you covered. And at the end of the video, we'll break down some of our top 5 tax saving and tax filing tips to help you save on your tax bill. So let's get stuck in. So I need to file my tax return by the 31st of January. My accountant's ignoring me, and I don't want to file with HMRC because I know I'm leaving money on the table. So I've come to Tax. I'm hoping Tax might be able to save me a bit of money. Anyway, let's get started. So I'll click next, and this will take me into a few questions, introductory questions, that will build my personalized experience. I just need to select that I'm filing my personal tax return and that I'm filing for the 23-24 tax year. Now in this question here, around have any of these applied to you, income from overseas, resident of another country, I can just hit no. But obviously if you have some foreign income or if you've moved in or out of the UK, some of these might be applicable to you. I then need to select my job status. Now I'm self-employed and that's the reason why I need to file a tax return. But in your situation, it could be employment, you might be a landlord, you might have your own limited company, you might be a partner in a partnership. Pick what's most relevant to you and Tax will do the rest. We then need to select our other sources of income, for example, interest or dividends, rental income, pension income, etc. In this case, I will just click none, as none of these apply to me. And then similarly, for having sold any assets, these are looking at capital gains, we can hit no here too, in my personal situation. Now, obviously, if you've sold any shares or crypto, for example, which has been doing great recently, you may need to report some of that here. And then finally, where you heard about us. This will most likely be Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, etc. Now we just need to create our account. Perfect. Now I've signed up, all my progress from here on in is saved. So I can come back to this at any point. And remember, you can be doing this on your mobile or on your PC, whichever is easiest for you. Now, I'll just skip through this. I just get a bit of an introduction to Tax. And then I can jump in to the self-employment section. Now, obviously at this point, this will be very different based on your particular situation. Me, I'm self-employed, so I'll input the details around my self-employment here. Okay, perfect. We just needed to add some introductory information for our self-employment, and then we can hit update. Now, this question is interesting. We've got different industries which you can select, such as content creators, construction, health and fitness, music, etc. Now, one of these may apply to you, or you can just hit skip. But what this does, it will ensure that the expenses that we show you will relate to your particular industry. I'll choose freelancer, for example. I then need to enter my earnings, and this is where keeping track of your income is super important. For this case, I'm going to enter earnings of around 60k. Did I have any expenses? Now, this is where we really start to claim as much as we can back based on our expenses. And this will help to reduce our profits and therefore reduce the tax that we pay to HMRC. So do I use a phone for work? Yes. Now, a lot of people, especially these days, use a personal phone, but they also use it for work, right? It could be content, it could be sending emails, etc. So it's about £1,000 for the phone. I probably use the phone 75% of the time for work, so a good £750 we can use to claim. Is my main office at home? Now, me personally, yes, it is. So I will be claiming back on some of the rent, the home bills, etc. So when it comes to working from home, I personally work from home around 120 hours per month. And then I would like to claim tax relief for my home bills too. So we have around 3 rooms in the house, and I use one of them for work. Now, rooms, that can mean things like your kind of bedrooms, kitchen, living room. My kitchen, living room are interconnected, so I'm going to use 3 rooms, and I use one of these rooms probably about half the time. I do use it for work, half the time for chilling out as well. And then I can add some of my home expenses in these boxes here. There we go. We've got all our home expenses, and this will all be used as a deduction to help us lower that tax bill. Did I drive for work? I'm going to hit yes to this. I was doing some travel to meet clients, so for those cases it's worth me claiming back some of the mileage. Now, you can either claim mileage or total vehicle costs. Personally, I like using mileage because it's a bit more simple, but total vehicle costs are great if you're a driver, careers, that kind of a thing, where you have a lot of vehicle expenses, cleaning, etc. Now, I did around 1,500 miles Now remember, it's good to keep a travel log if you are claiming mileage. Now other expense costs based on my industry. So perfect. So now I've added the bulk of our expenses in, ranging from things like laptop, travel, to even the tax fee down here. Even things like wages if you've had to pay other subcontractors to help complete your work. Perfect. Now these expenses were suggested to me as well, so take a look at all the expenses on there and make sure to keep track of absolutely everything. I'll hit next and we'll jump into the next question around purchasing a car for the business. Now in this case, I'm going to select no, I didn't purchase a car for the business and I don't have any losses to bring forward from a previous year. And as you can see, my tax bill up there provides me with that constant estimate of what my tax is looking like. Now I did make some payments on account from last year, so I will show you where to add that in as well. Credits and deductions. Now these are things like pension contributions, venture capital schemes, marriage allowance, etc. These are a little bit more rare, but as you get more involved in the tax world, you'll see how useful these things can be. And I'll talk a bit about this later on at the end of the video. We then have the general section. So this is where I can add in my payments on account from the previous tax year, from the last tax return that I filed. Now payments on account are essentially prepayments for your next tax return. So when I filed my tax return last year, I had to make these prepayments. At the time it was horrible. I was thinking I had to pay an extra amount to HMRC. But now it's good because I know it lowers my tax bill for this January. I will probably need to make payments on account again, but it's something that you'll get used to as you go through the tax process. This only really impacts you if you're self-employed or if most of your income is coming from self-employment. I'm going to hit no to having a student loan or no to any other taxable income. Perfect. And then that's the general section completed too. I'm just going to skip past the personal info section and we'll jump into the final bits. Personal info section complete. It's just information about yourself, your address, your phone number, etc. Now we'll look at the final section at tax. So I can see I owe HMRC an additional £886 for the 23-24 tax year that we've just completed. Now here's where I can also reduce my payments on account for next year. Now this can be useful, especially if you are self-employed and if you are expecting your income to be lower. Now let me skip ahead to after payment. Perfect, so that's payment successfully completed, and then we can see the full tax calculation. So we can see exactly how we've calculated that £886 that I now owe HMRC. So we can see how we've used personal allowances, the basic rate band, etc. Now at this point as well, what I love about tax is that I'm able to look at, right, this is my current tax status, but what would happen if I put some money into a venture capital scheme, into my pension, if I became self-employed and earned a bit more, if I bought this expense? I can use tax to model my tax return and always check what my tax outcome will look like. And we'll talk a bit about those tax saving tips as well in a second. But the final few stages is just to add in some additional notes to send to HMRC. There'll also be a question just to verify your identity. Now this is for anti-money laundering compliance. It takes a few seconds online. You just need to scan a photo ID or a passport and you'll be complete. And then no, I've not filed a tax return before for this year, my UTR. And then I can preview my self-assessment tax return. I click view and then here we go. This is the tax return itself that will be submitted to HMRC, but it's all done online. I don't need to print this out. This is just a draft for me to review that I can see everything looks okay. And there's also the taxed pack, which we'll go into in a second as well. And then once I press that submit to HMRC button, that's it. The tax return is gone to HMRC. I'm all done from a HMRC perspective. I just need to make payment, or if I'm expecting a refund, I'll get that refund normally within 5 to 10 working days. Perfect. Now, let's get on to some of those tax saving tips that we mentioned earlier. Now, when you file a tax return with us, you will receive this taxed pack. Now, this will contain things like your tax breakdown, but also some tax saving tips depending on your situation. For example, I'm self-employed, so here are 3 key tips for me around using my allowable expenses, potentially incorporating into a limited company with the lower corporation tax, risk separation, etc. And also making tax digital, which is a tax change coming to impact all self-employed people from next year. But anyway, let's see some of those other tax tips that we were talking about. Now, the first one would be to use up all your allowances. Make sure that when you are looking at filing your tax return or within the tax year, use up your personal allowance, your trading allowance, your capital gains savings, and your dividend allowance. If you're looking at all of those allowances, you're really going to be reducing your tax bill and structuring your investments quite efficiently. Now, personally, I think this second one is the most important. It's claiming back on everything that you can. So if you're self-employed, claim back on all the business expenses that you've incurred throughout the year. I think it's super important to keep a personal account and a business account when it comes to banking. This allows you to keep track of all your expenses in a super easy way. Then when it comes to year end, all you need to do is look through the bank statements, see exactly what you can expense, and then look at your personal bank account and see, right, what are those other things that might be business expenses too, things like your home bills, etc. And that's where using tax becomes super tax efficient, as we'll make sure that you get the maximum out of those expenses, looking at all those different things and prompting you to save back on what you can. And finally, look at things like credits and deductions. So these could be pension contributions, which help to reduce your adjusted income, so reduce the overall income that you're taxed on if you're a higher taxpayer, which is super important if you earn between 100 and 125k, because you're in that 60% tax trap. But pension contributions as well, HMRC top it up. But obviously the drawback is that it can't be taken out until you hit retirement age. But for some of you that might be approaching that age or that have excess income, that can be super helpful and tax efficient. Separately, venture capital schemes are great. They are very risky investing in early stage startups, but they come with 30 to 50% tax credits depending on the stage of the business that you're investing in. Now that, if you're staring down a big tax bill, can be a great relief. For example, if you invest 5k into an SCIS company, you'll get 2.5k back as a tax credit from HMRC. So that's our tax saving tips, but I can't go without saying to try Taxed. In itself, that is a tax saving tip, as you'll surely be able to find different ways that you may be able to save on your tax bill. Whether it be for this year or for next year, Tax will help you understand what's available to you and how you can claim back on as much of your taxes as possible.